Welcome to starting with today's conversation on suicide in the Black community with Kalisha Smith, a licensed certified social worker. We are excited about this necessary conversation. May not be easy to have, but such an important conversation. So thank you for joining us. Sit back, relax, and we'll get started very shortly. Hey there. Thank you for joining. Let us know how your day is going in the chats while we wait to have Kalisha join us. Hump day here, barely making it through the week, but I am excited for this conversation for sure. So while we're here, I might as well give you some updates while we're waiting for people to join in. Starting with today, as you may have seen on the feed, is back at Lee's Barbershop for the Shape Up. And I'm just going to make sure she can get on. All right, I'm going to stop and come back. Oh, she's here. All right, awesome. So let me add her. Yes.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
Hi. Are you hearing and seeing me well?
I am. I'll give you a few
Perfect.
seconds to get situated.
Thank you. All right. I think this is as good as we're going to get. Thanks for your patience.
You're welcome.
Technology has not been my friend today.
It has not, and it was having a lot of glitches. It wasn't letting me come on at first, and so I had to find some workarounds. So I'm glad you were able to join us as well.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be starting with today.
Yay!
This
Thank you
evening.
so much. So let's just introduce ourselves real quick.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit. Well, I'll get started. My name is Charlene Anderson. I'm the founder and executive director for Starting With Today. Starting With Today does a lot of programming that centers and celebrates and cultivates Black well-being and liberation. And so we do that through a series of programs around career development, economic empowerment, and of course, mental health and well-being. So all of those things that make us whole and well and free and autonomous beings is the center of our ethos as an organization. And today we have Ms. Kalisha Smith. So tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everybody. I always kind of greet by saying, hey, friends.
Hey.
So I'm Kalisha. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of New Jersey. And so I'm also a licensed minister in the Christian faith. And so I've been in the social service field now for 18 years.
Wow.
I was counting today.
Wow.
And specifically in suicide prevention for around 8 or 9 years. A little bit about myself. I'm married to my life partner who attended Howard University with me. HU. And we are the parents of 5 awesome,
amazing,
5 whole daughters. I'm not sure who thought that was a good idea, but I'm so blessed to have them. And so, I really enter this space as, being very mindful that we come as whole people, right? I come as a therapist, I come as a woman of faith, but I also come as a spouse, I come as a mom, I come as a daughter, I come as a person. Right. So I'm happy to be here with you guys today.
Thank you so much for having us. And I love the way you all, from the outside in, nurture the 5+ personalities happening over there. And they all have their own beautiful gifts and light. And I think it's really important too, as we talk about, faith and mental health, especially in the Black community. where we
Yes,
have not been able to have those conversations, or we're just now beginning to have those conversations about the intersex. I think that lens is important to bring to this space too, that said, hey, you can be, have your faith, you can be Christian, you can have any faith that you want, and you can still get support that you need,
absolutely.
for your mental health and your health overall.
Absolutely.
All right, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's a really important conversation, right?
Right.
Because when we think about the barriers that have gotten in the way of people taking care of their whole selves, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that has definitely been a barrier is what people think others will feel about them if they see them, right? And so quite often you hear people in communities of faith, various communities, but I'll speak specific to the Christian Black community because that's what I'm a part of proudly. But quite often we hear, people saying, I can't go get help because, I just need to do this one thing about it, or I don't want people to think I lack in faith, or that I'm sinning, or something like that. And really what I see myself is as a bridge, right?
Right.
I stand in the gap between folks who aren't sure about therapy, Black folks, folks of faith, and the mental health, system or organization. But I stand in that gap not because I believe so firmly in the mental health organization, but I believe firmly in whole person wellness.
Yeah.
And in order to get there, we have to use the systems that are available to us.
Absolutely. I'm glad you bring that up, because a lot of things I think we've lost, both when I transit to America, through chattel slavery, of course, is the traditions of community and healing, collective healing, which is, very critical to starting with today and the work that we do. And then also too, since then, like, since the church has been kind of decentralized as a main institution in the Black community, where we used to have these more intimate gatherings of healing, like even Sunday dinners with our families, or getting together on the holidays, all those things that are part of being connected to community and pulling in people and resources and information in a way that celebrates us individually as our wholeness, but also understands our responsibility to each other.
Absolutely, right? So you're going to hear me say it many times in our short conversation tonight. Connection is prevention. Connection, that's the number one, right? So proper linkage and connection to what helps people remain healthy and strong, that is the number one prevention, right? So in Black communities, traditionally, the connection has been what has helped us to make it and to survive, right? But it's up to us to make sure that we're linking people to the systems and to the services and to the people who are ready to help them, so that we're not connecting them to stigmatizing agencies or to stigmatizing groups, right? So we want to connect in healthy ways.
I mean, we can start right there. That's there you go. But let's talk a little bit of why this conversation is necessary. This is something we have kind of began to reach out months and months ago, of course, before we actually begin to organize this conversation. It's something that's been on my heart for a while. And then we have these series of, really well-known, figures or connections in the Black community of people who began to die by suicide. And I'm really strategic because I've learned recently over the last year
nice job
that we don't use commit because we're not saying it's a crime.
Right. So we really want to use language that is, to the best of our ability, free from that social meaning making that has a negative connotation, right? Yes. So when we say commit, we think of crimes, right? Or offenses. When we say another term that was used back in the day was like successful, unsuccessful. Ooh. We are not in any way thinking that somebody losing their life to suicide is a success, right? Conversely, somebody that's alive, right? We're not calling it unsuccessful, right? We're calling it an attempt, and we're thankful they're still alive. Right. So nice job with language, because language matters.
It does. It does.
How we talk about the thing really impacts people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it prevents us from having the conversations that we need to have, right? But There was the lady who was a pageant. Her name is escaping me at the moment. I believe it's Christina. In New York, Regina Hall's son recently did pass by suicide, and there's been so many others who have.
There was a local elected official in the DMV area as well.
Really?
Back in, I want to say January.
Wow, missed that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another social media lady again. I believe her name was Jasmine. I wasn't a follower of her, but she had a huge following. And had in the pandemic, I think a lot of things we haven't begun to address is the weight of this pandemic is going to rear its head if it has not already done it on our mental and well-being. So we just want to make sure that people have some tools, some resources to navigate this. So that was kind of it. And the thing about it is, I think the first time I heard of a suicide, I was maybe 10 or 11, and a lady at church died by suicide. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but we didn't have a lot of language, and I was a kid, so they were trying to. I'm hearing, the church tell the story, and all I know is that she passed in her wedding dress, so she was making a statement, right? She was making a statement, and in my 10-year-old eyes, I was like, wow, that's a statement if you're going to make a statement.
Right.
But then how do you begin to process this and then by the time I get to Howard, we're learning about people who were enslaved, who opted,
Take it there. I was just having this conversation recently.
Right.
As a suicide preventionist, but also as someone who has the heart of an abolitionist, if not always the actions, right? That is a very interesting conversation, isn't it?
It is. And it's so, and that's my point. It's so nuanced. And I think a lot of times we make it black or white, without the totality of this conversation. And who chose freedom, and it comes up again in Black Panther. It's I'd rather be dead than enslaved. So I think a lot of things we need to talk about, which we can't get into the breadth of this conversation, but the weight of oppression. But that is a factor when we're talking specifically about the Black community in this lens, in this conversation.
Absolutely. So, okay. As we start the conversation, I want to lay a little groundwork. Yes. And you've done so beautifully, starting with language, right? That's one of the things I always want to make sure that we talk about, so that we are not inadvertently causing more trauma or stigmatizing folks in the conversation, right? Where we're trying to help. So let's take step 2 in that piece of the groundwork and say, listen, what we're about to talk about and what we've already started talking about, it might elicit feelings for those who are watching. You might feel some kind of way. You might, even in the first 5 minutes, Charlene, you're back at 10 years old, right? Remembering, right? You might review your life history, or you might recognize signs or just concerning behavior, right? As we get into that, in a family member, in a friend, in a coworker, maybe even yourself. So I want to start by telling you, 1, it's okay. 2, you are not alone. You're not by yourself. So even if you feel alone in this moment when you're recognizing some things, don't let that voice continue to speak to you. There's hope, there's healing, there's help. Okay. So I just want to say, if there's anybody that's listening to this and you're feeling too sensitive, right? Maybe you've had a recent loss due to suicide. Maybe you yourself are very vulnerable due to your own mental health. Maybe this isn't the conversation for you right now. Pause it, come back to it later, right? It'll be saved, it'll be archived.
Absolutely.
If you have your own mental health wellness person, if you have your own spiritual leader and you feel some kind of way during the conversation, reach out to them. Right? Feel free to reach out to myself or Charlene after the conversation. Absolutely. If you need to, we can direct you to resources in your community. But I just think it's very important that we make sure that we lay the groundwork for the conversation and normalize the fact that what we're talking about is not necessarily the most inviting conversation.
It
Who
was just
really wants to
that.
spend their Wednesday night talking about mental health concerns and suicide? I mean, you'd rather it's a summer night, you'd rather do something else. But the truth of the matter is we have to have these conversations because we want to save lives.
And there's
We
not
want
a
our
good
people
time.
to
There's
live.
not like a great time to have it, right? It needs to happen.
Right.
It needs to happen. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank you so much for that groundwork and that the language and setting the parameters of this. So let's talk a little bit about, do you have any stats of where we are as a Black community around suicide?
So I'm going to be very mindful as we talk about stats. I know, we like numbers. We want to know what's the data. Well, make this presentation mean something, right? And I'm going to bring some stats, but I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty with some things. One, because what we don't want to inadvertently do, because we don't know who's watching or who will watch. What we don't want to inadvertently do is normalize the idea that these many people are dying by suicide.
Indeed.
Right? So we want to be thoughtful. I'm going to share some stats, but I'm not going to share all of them. Some of them I might not spend a lot of time on. Some of them I might not touch, right? But it's because I want people to understand it's a concern. It's a public health issue, but it's not an epidemic. It's not.
Okay.
So that means that the majority of people that have suicidal ideation, what is ideation? Ideation talks about the range or the continuum when people are thinking about or planning for suicide. It could be anything from a passing, fleeting thought all the way to a very detailed, organized plan that has means. And means are the thing that you would use to take your life, right? So when we're thinking about this, what we know is the vast majority of people that have ideation do not die by suicide.
Wow, that's refreshing.
So that is like a sigh of relief, right? Yeah, I feel like we need that, right? Because in this conversation, we need to have hope, right? Now, suicide is still an important conversation. It's been a public health issue since 1999. The rates are increasing, particularly with Black folks and also with Indigenous folks. And there's lots of reasons, and we can talk about that if we want to get into it. But I just like to put that out there because even though we are seeing it so heavily in the news, and even though it seems as though, our Black young and kind of like young people, right? It seems like their deaths are being publicized graphically, right? And that's another thing we don't want to do. We don't want to graphically talk about details. That's not helpful to people.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. But it seems as though our lives and what is happening with people's inner mental health workings is on full display.
It is. You're right. Because now I'm thinking about I got the imagery at 10 and it has stuck.
Right.
Right.
Right. And think about it. If you were vulnerable or having a moment where you're considering or contemplating, does your life have meaning? And by which means, if you're down that road, having those graphic details, that's not going to help you push towards hope.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
It normalizes this idea that everybody's dying. Right. And we want to confront that head on. Everybody is not dying, but people do struggle.
Yeah.
And here's what we also want to say. One life lost is way too many.
Yeah, indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
Okay, so let's talk about stats. Typically, suicide is in the top 10 leading causes of death across the lifespan. So whether we're talking about a young person, we, in suicide prevention, we really start looking at stats for youth around 10. Although when I talk about Blackness, we're going to have to put a pin in that 10, okay? But typically, we're talking about 10 all the way up. So when we think about leading causes of death, you're taking all of the causes, illnesses, accidents, all kinds of things. Suicide, no matter kind of what age you're at on that continuum of the lifespan, it's in the top 10. That's something to be concerned about.
That is concerning. And you said that's for Black people specifically or just America?
That's people. America.
People in general. America.
Yeah. Right? And so if we want to think about Blackness specifically, right, that's what we're here to talk about. What we know is that over the past 20 years, our rates of people dying by suicide continues to increase, as well as attempts, right? And so attempts is when you have the idea or the thought, right, and you act on that idea and thought in some way. It could result in an injury or it might not. But attempts, right? Thankfully, you're still living after.
Right.
But those are increasing in our community. And here's the one, like, I feel like you need to take a deep breath. I know I needed to when I recognized what this stat was really saying to me. When we look at our Black youth in this country, ages 15 to 24, right? Suicide is the second leading cause of death. You need to take a deep breath.
Wow.
I know I need to every time I say it. Whew.
Wow.
Second, number two. So of all the things that our young people deal with, right? Of all the things that could take their precious and young lives, right? We're talking about young folks, adolescents. We're talking about people in their early 20s transitioning into adulthood. Suicide is the second leading cause of death. Now, here's the other thing that's a little, I see somebody said, that's heavy. It is heavy, right? So the other thing we want to kind of look at, I said when we look at the lifespan, and we're talking about the lifespan in regard to suicide, you know, in the earlier days, we really focused on 10 and up. The reason we focused on 10 and up is because we think 10 is about the time that a typical developing youth would understand the finality of death, right? Mm-hmm. Here's what we see in our Black youth.
We know.
We see that youth 5.
Wow.
5 to 13, right? They are 2 times as likely to die by suicide than their white counterparts.
Wow.
That's our kindergartners, our first graders. That's our elementary school. 2 times as likely. So what does that say to me as a therapist, as a mom, as a person who cares, right? It says that these conversations have to happen with us and with our babies.
Right. Wow. And we think we're shielding, but like it's already, wow. And then that's okay. I'll let you go because I don't have no words. Like we just
right. But, and I think
but the avoidance of the conversation is not working. Is what we know.
No, we know that the avoidance is not working. We know that trying to force kids just to be better, to act better, to survive, to be harder, don't cry, don't express your emotions, that's not working either. You know why? Because attempts are up by 73% in Black adolescents, right? And so this is such an alarming thing that here in Jersey, Bonnie Watson Coleman, she's a representative along with the Congressional Black Caucus back in 2019, pre-pandemic, they put together a task force and they actually called it, I love the name, Ring the Alarm. Ooh. Because it's so concerning when we think about our youth because these rates are climbing. Here's some other things that I think are really important. I know this conversation is specific to Blackness, and I think that's a really important conversation.
Right.
But I want to kind of like broaden the scope because what we understand is that while suicide is not an epidemic, right, it's a public health crisis or a public health concern, we know that suicide touches every community.
Oof.
Every community. No one is exempt. No one, so whether we're looking at the rates increasing in our Black youth, whether we're looking at, the highest rate in this country actually is for white middle-aged men. Mm-hmm. So those are our coworkers. Those are maybe spouses. Those are, our partners, right? Those are folks that we know, people that we encounter, right? And then the second highest rate is for indigenous folks, Alaska Native. They're kind of like lumped together. Right. So we know that that might be Black folks' family members. Right. We know that those are people we also know, people we connect with.
Right.
We all, and then the third largest group right now in our country is Black men.
Wow.
Right. And then so when we look at that, and then we pay attention to populations with high risk based on some of the challenges that they endure, based on, we can get into a long conversation about power, privilege, and oppression and how that, impacts those, right? But when we think about it, people whose risk are also increased are people with legal involvement.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, I don't want to get into details, but, Khalif Broder.
Yeah.
When we think about him being incarcerated at such a young age, right, for so many years, and then coming out and not really having that support to get him through, and no one really apologizing for what had been done to him in that oppressive system, right? So when we think about people losing their freedom, we
Yeah.
touched on it earlier,
Yeah.
right? Your suicide risks increase.
Yeah.
Black youth, like we said, are up. Veterans, right?
Right.
They have their numbers are higher. LGBTQ folks,
Yeah.
right? And so their rates are incredibly high.
Wow.
And it really is around this like idea around lack of acceptance, and the one I think is so huge, lack of social support.
Ooh. And that's a great note to like just let's pull that in a little bit, especially this last couple of days of Pride Month. And we did a series, it might have been last year or the year before, around Black LGBT communities, where we really are talking about like accepting what you're talking about, this whole self. Like, do we accept whole selves in our spaces? And then how can we be a safe space for people to have the social networks that they need to thrive like everyone else, instead of this, like, picking it's so much where I feel like we have a responsibility to lean into love more.
So I previously was privileged to work on an adolescent inpatient unit for youth that were having psychiatric emergencies. And typically what that boils down to are youth who are suicidal, homicidal, or psychotic, right? And quite often I would be working with a family of a young person who is just learning themselves and their identity or their orientation, right? And I would have a parent, family member, or a caregiver, or guardian that really was having a hard time for a number of reasons, right? Could be based on their belief system, right? And I'm not here to challenge anyone's belief system. I want to be clear about that. It could be about their family history. It could be just, value system that they have for themselves. And what I always leaned heavy into, particularly with parents and caregivers, I said, we're here because your child wants to die.
Oof.
That's why we're here. This conversation is because someone is struggling with seeing the intrinsic value that I believe is put in every life. So before you kind of get into discussing whether or not you agree or disagree, accept or don't accept, let's be real about what we're actually talking about.
That's real.
We want this person to live. Absolutely. Right? So we're not even like going to dig down into like how you feel and your values. Like, do you agree with me that this person in front of us should live? Right? And so a lot of the time, that's where I go with people that I'm working with, families, because when you get down into people's belief systems, sometimes they get stuck and it's really hard for lots of reasons, right? They might have strong value or belief connected to many things. So I'm not looking to challenge that, right? It does me no good in this sense. We can have those conversations later. And in other ways. But what I do really push into, really lean into, is, are you willing to do what it takes so that this person in front of you can live? Are you willing to connect them to resources that will support them? Are you willing to help them see the value of life for them? Can you help them see a future for themselves? So there's a person named Caitlin Ryan, for those who, might have their own feelings about this, right? And I don't pretend to be an expert on her work, but I do know that she has something called the Acceptance Project, and she's worked with all kinds of families. And I want to say it's out of California. And so the premise of her work is that acceptance is not yes or no, all or nothing. Acceptance is a continuum. And I think that that's really liberating for people who hold strong to their value of a certain thing, right? And so what she really talks about is that, you kind of like what I leaned into, but much more eloquently, is that, can you decide to support your, child or whom you're giving care to with a house? Can they live here? Can they eat here? Right? Like, so can we move from no, nothing at all to I accept you wanting to live and I want to keep you alive? Can I make sure that you have a lunch? Can I make sure that you have food? Right? I may not ever be able to get to this level that, you may think, or that, society may think, but can I help keep this child I love alive because I know that there's value in their life and because I believe and love them? I can do that. Right? So really helping folks say, okay, wait, I can do that.
That is
And I think
so
that is the
good.
bridge
That's
gap.
so good. That's so good. That's so good as I see people struggle with accepting, who their child is versus I seeing people celebrate and embrace and love on and lean into more love with their children or family members or community members because they know it's such a hard wall or barrier that they're going to have to be facing with the outside world.
Right. And so when we, we'll touch on it, when we get to it, but when we think about prevention is having these conversations, right? But it's not just that. Prevention is also like advocacy, standing up for folks, but prevention is also making that people's basic needs are met.
Wow.
When you don't have to worry about your basic needs, that alleviates so much stress of your life, right?
Woo!
When I don't have to worry about being homeless, right? When I don't have to worry about food security, when I know that I have a safe place to lay my head at night,
Yeah.
right? That helps me know that my life has value and meaning. So if I can commit as a person in the community, as a person of faith, as a parent or whatever, right? A teacher, if I can commit no matter what I might think or feel, that I am going to commit myself to making sure that you have what you need to be socially supported, then I am also engaging in prevention work.
This is so good. I feel so good. Okay, so let's transition a bit. You dropped so much. I just want to make sure we allow time and
let's do it
for the conversation, and it's probably may have to do it again. So let's talk a little bit about warning signs before we get to the ideation and planning stage.
Okay, so when we talk about prevention, we look at three things, right? We look at risk factors, and right? So risk factors are the things that contribute to something, right? So I want to be clear, suicide does not have like a singular cause. Like, you might hear somebody say like they broke up and then he died by suicide, because that's not the cause.
Right.
That's a risk factor, that's a contributing factor, right? But suicide is complex and has many contributing factors. Quite often things that we outside looking in may not know, right? We may not know someone's mental health journey. We may not know the trauma they've experienced. We may not know the social supports that they're lacking, right? All of those things. And so then the last thing we see might be the breakup. We say, oh, that's what did it. No, that was a part of this larger picture, right? So we look at risk factors, we look at warning signs, and we look at protective factors. So when we think of risk factors, are things that contribute to the likelihood that someone may die. And I say likelihood, right? Just because you have a risk factor or a warning sign doesn't mean that you will die. Right? This is just factors and likelihood. One of the main ones we have to talk about are mental health disorders and mental health concerns.
Absolutely.
Ooh, I know how Black folks feel about that.
And it's so thing when you talk about it, right? We all have family members who have experienced acute or chronic mental health, and they're always ostracized or not talked about or like talked around. But we don't have language, we don't have diagnosis, we don't have treatment. Like we don't talk about it enough. And even now, I mean, definitely as a child, but now even as an adult, we're really not naming the thing or addressing the issue,
Absolutely. Right. So mental health disorders, untreated, misdiagnosed, undiagnosed mental health disorders are a major risk factor. Right. And so here's what we know. We know that 1 in 5, some stats say 1 in 4 adults in the US have a diagnosable mental health illness or disorder. Yeah. Right. So that's, you put you and all your girlfriends in the room, somebody's struggling.
Right.
Right. So like let's normalize it a bit, right? Like let's not make it the person down the street or the family member we don't see. It is those people, right? But it's also us.
It's us.
Right. So when we think about it that way.
We pre-conversation, you're like, how you doing? I said, girl.
Right. So when we think about, let's just take the common mental health disorders or diagnoses: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and substance use disorders. Okay. So I like to break down depression and anxiety. I won't break down anxiety so much, but let's break down depression, particularly when we're we're speaking about Black folks, right? Because we know that about 16% of Black Americans report that they have a mental health diagnosis, right? And many of those folks are struggling with depression.
Yeah.
Quite often, right? Thumbs up or say something in the comments if you're with me. We think as Black folks, we don't get depressed, right? We don't get depressed. We don't have time for depression. Right? We're too strong to be, depressed, because we think of depression, right, as what we see on TV, as someone who stops working, as someone who doesn't keep going, someone who's incredibly tearful, as someone who can't, move forward. But because of our DNA, right, the legacy that's implanted in us, we many times Black people can still function.
Right.
Right.
And have to function.
And have to, right? So when we think about depression, I tell my clients that I work with in my private practice, Wise Counsel, I quite often say, okay, let me describe it like this. Do like a little mental checklist. Have you noticed a loss of concentration? Are you more irritable? Do you have poor motivation? Do you have just enough energy to get through your day, right? But when you get home, you're completely exhausted, wiped out, can't do anything for yourself, can't rest. Do you see increased isolation? And when we think about the pandemic and the effects, right? Isolation.
It's
right?
Even reintegrating for me is still, I'm going through the motions, but I'm not all the way there yet. It's challenging.
Right? So that isolation is a big one. Changes in hygiene or appetite. Apathy. I love this one. Apathy is when you just, unbothered to the 100%. You just can't feel anything about things, right? Like you just don't care. It's like whatever. Almost like numb, right? I don't care about it. And anhedonia, right? That's when things that you love, things that you enjoy, your time with your people, your hobby, they just don't do it for you anymore.
Wow.
Right? So when you do that checklist.
I never heard that before. What's it called?
Anhedonia.
Anhedonia? Okay, I gotta look that one up because I felt that before.
Right? So when you think about that checklist, and I give that checklist to my clients who identify as Black, then they're like, hold on, wait a minute, check, right? And so I've moved from saying depressed to now saying soul tired.
Yeah.
Because I think that captures our experience differently, right? Not every client that I work with that identifies as Black can relate to that word depression, but almost all of them can relate to this idea of soul tired, inner person tired, where you just don't have enough to give anymore.
Oof.
Right? So when we think about mental health concerns and we think about that as a contributing factor, right, it's understandable now when we really break it down and look at what we've been struggling with. And here's what we know about the, go ahead.
When we said this on the pre-call, it resonated so deeply. And I just want to put some emphasis there. This so tired. And even what we were talking about before, just our commute, violent, kidnapping and dragging and chattel slavery and Jim Crow and where we are now in America and how it weathers the soul. And then again, when we talk about this connection and hope and how we have to really, pour back into repair that we'll talk about. But I think there's some acknowledgement in saying, hey, this is not necessarily something wrong with you or something that you've done. Like these are a lot of things and systems that, are beyond our control or that we've inherited or that then on top of your own life experiences can wear.
Right. It's really about the person and the environment, right? Yeah. So the environment has its own set of factors, right? Like everything you named, right? Whether we're talking about oppressive systems, whether we're talking about systems that just fight to keep us out, right? So maybe we don't feel the intense oppression, but maybe you just don't feel welcomed. I mean, I don't know about you. If you live through a microaggression, it wears on you, right? It does, you know, and so the environment around us, right? We're talking about the Black experience, but we're also talking about just the experience of women in America.
Yeah.
We're talking about the experience of people of color in general in America, right? We're talking about the experience of those disenfranchised by their economic, all of those things. All right, am I back? All right. So all of
Yeah, I'm
those
back. I'm sorry. I something happened.
okay, no problem. All of those
Okay, we're good.
things, right, contribute to how we're feeling and how we're dealing emotionally,
Yeah.
right? And then we, like you said, we bring our own story, we bring our own trauma, we bring our own family history. Now, I want to put a pin in there, right, and say, listen, we are a strong people.
Yeah.
We are a surviving people,
Yeah.
right? And our ancestors, our foremothers and fathers, you know, figured out how to make it through,
Mm.
you know, some of the most brutal situations. And that, you know, is also
You know,
encoded in our DNA,
hello. That's a word.
right? So now is the time where we have the benefit of not only having that coded into our DNA, but having language and having resources that are different. So hopefully we don't have people having to die to not be oppressed.
Yeah. Ooh.
Right? So that suicide isn't an option in people's minds.
Right.
Right? That there's hope and healing.
That's so good. That's so good. And you know, I think it's you break it down in such a way that we can take it with us and share it with us, share it with other people. And I think that's always the goal, like the conversations that we have in our spaces, that the language is there where people can digest it in real time and over time, and then also be able to share that language with someone else, because I think language is freeing. Not knowing you're alone
Yes.
is freeing. Feeling
Liberation.
seen is freeing. And then being accepted and say, hey, you know, a lot through this conversation, and one of my friends is on here like, you know, I need to have a walk. Do you want to go for a walk? And like those things of just like, you're not alone in this I'm here with you.
Right.
It's just, it adds so much value in remembering to this space. All right, so let's talk a little bit about
The
what to
exact
do.
warning signs, right?
Huh?
Did you want me to talk more about exact warning signs to
Oh,
look
yeah,
for?
sorry. Yes, go ahead.
No problem.
Don't rush me. I'm sorry.
So flashing,
I don't want to rush
flashing.
you.
No, I just want to get these couple of things out. I know we were talking about so much good
Yeah.
stuff. But flashing lights, here are the warning signs.
Okay.
Folks that are having fixation on death, right? Even if they're not talking about their own death, but I always tell this story about how I worked with a client. And, you know, I was just talking to the person about music and what artists they like. And the first artist they told me was somebody that died by suicide. And then we talked more. And then the second artist we talked about was somebody that died by suicide. And then by the third, I didn't realize it until about the third time. I said, you know, every person that this person likes and feels close to and connects through music with has died by suicide. Like,
Right.
that's something for me to like take note of, right? That's a concern.
Yeah.
Like, that's interesting. And, you know, they knew it too. It wasn't like, it was like, you know, a coincidence.
Right.
They knew that that was a part of those folks' story, right? So people who are fixated on death, people who are, when folks are researching ways to end their life, our young people in particular, you know, anything is on that internet, right? As older folks will say, the internet, you know, and so people can easily type in something to look for a way to end their life. And so the good thing is that when you use the word suicide, the first thing that pops up in almost every search engine is the hotline for prevention.
Good.
So
Okay.
that's a great resource, right? But, you know, we want to be mindful if people are looking for ways to end their life or acquiring means, hoarding medication, anything like that. I think hoarding medication when I talk about young folks and also when I talk about the elderly.
Wow.
The numbers do spike for folks who are elderly.
Wow.
Right, when we think about race, because when you think about sense of purpose and sense of hope for tomorrow, what's next for them, you know, maybe their friends, their family members, their peers are passing away and they're still here. You know, it's hard for folks to conceptualize that there's more life for them. So you want to pay attention to your elderly folks, your grandma. What's going on with your grandma?
Yeah.
You know what's going on with your older uncle,
Yeah.
your great uncle. When people start giving away their important possessions, like out of nowhere.
Ooh,
Right?
okay.
They're giving you stuff that matters. You know, this is my family ring. It's not your birthday. It's not a special occasion. I just want you to have it. When we talk about young people, I always bring up like all of a sudden your child is gifted a game console by another child that you know that they love. Like, well, why did Taekwon give you
Wait,
his game?
let's pause there because I did that when I was a kid.
Okay,
But I didn't play video games. I was like, oh, they can play video games. So I was like, I'm not really using it
right.
like that.
But
So
we dug down and we saw that it was a gift of love
right.
because, right? So, like we said, a warning sign does not mean that you will die by suicide. Charlene is a witness, right?
Right.
A warning sign is just that. It means that it's a flashing light. Pay attention,
Yeah.
right? And when you pay attention, you might realize, okay, no problem. But if you don't pay attention, you might miss something.
Woo. That's good. That's good.
Right. Significant changes in people's appearance and behavior.
Mm.
People starting to say goodbye and organizing their affairs. Nothing wrong with getting life insurance. Nothing wrong with having a will. But all of a sudden, they're handing out copies. All of a sudden, you know, they're organizing in ways that they've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
This is one for folks that have acting out concerning emotional behaviors, increased high-risk behaviors. Suddenly now people are racing their cars. Suddenly they are engaging in activity that's illegal that maybe they have not engaged in before. Suddenly they're having encounters with police based on their own engaging in things and kind of looking for that encounter with the police officer. You know, those high risk behaviors you want to pay attention to. Increased substance use. You know, we know that alcohol is one of the most dangerous for folks who are struggling with their emotional and mental health, right? One, you cannot detox from alcohol on your own.
Oof. Yep.
Right? It can kill you.
Yeah.
We also know that alcohol lowers our inhibition and it increases impulsivity. Yeah. And the thing that works best for people who are struggling with that thought about suicide is ambivalence. That idea that I'm not quite sure. Most people have that. The reason why the numbers aren't greater is because there's space and time between the thought and the action. Alcohol limits that. Ooh. So when we start seeing people having that increased, you know, usage, and we know that they're struggling, we want to be concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Young people, we want to pay attention to their social media posts.
Ooh, okay.
They will tell us all kinds of stuff on there, won't they?
They will. Wow.
Right. And so the last two that I'll touch real quick is when people have an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. They can't think about what will come next. They can't imagine. And I don't mean like, oh, I'm going to go to college or, oh, I'm going to get this job. Just like I can envision myself being here and doing something.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And when they can't have that, or that, you know, they can't seem to find a sense of purpose greater than themselves, you know, we start to be concerned. And then also folks that feel like they're a burden to others.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry for calling you. I don't mean to bother you. You know, I don't want to tell you because I don't want you to go out of your way. Yeah. You know, those are all things as it increases, you know, and with these other risk factors or warning signs, you want to pay attention to. This
is so good. So good. Thank you for those. And like to your point, it's not any necessarily one thing. It's always layered and looking and asking questions. So what should we do when we are concerned?
All right. We should ask the question.
Ooh, great.
Yep, that's simple as that. Asking somebody if they've thought about suicide, if they've thought about dying, however you want to say it, right, does not implant the thought in their head. That is a myth. Asking them actually identifies you, the asker, as a safe space so that if they are contemplating anything, they know they can reach and connect to you. And if they haven't thought about suicide because they're not in an emotionally unwell place, then they're not in an emotionally unwell place. And you saying the word suicide will not elicit, you know, some strong emotion and make them think that they have to die.
Yeah.
Right? So it is the best thing to do, to ask somebody. Ask them directly. Practice it. When I first started doing this work 9 years ago, I had to learn to practice it because I was uncomfortable because
Wow.
I believed myths. I
Yeah.
thought Black people didn't die by suicide.
Mm.
I thought people of faith didn't die by suicide. I thought that it was something that impacted white people only.
Woo.
And I had never, even as a therapist back then in social services and social work, I did not have language for it.
Woo.
It was so far out of what I understood, right? And I had to learn to practice it, to say, how can I say it in a way that that the words will come out and I won't be so shocked as I'm saying it that I'm scaring the person in front of me.
Absolutely.
So I
Absolutely.
now say, have you thought about what life would be like if you didn't exist? Have you thought about ending your life? Have you thought about not living anymore?
Yeah.
Have you thought about suicide?
Yeah. Yeah.
Asking them directly,
I love that.
right? And so then be prepared for them to tell you the truth.
Ooh. And I think if you think about the truth just in general, a lot of times we feel like it needs to be comfortable for it to be effective. Like it's okay to sit in that discomfort of
Mm-hmm.
whatever someone's truth is, like it's okay to be
It's
uncomfortable.
okay to, yeah, it's okay for them to tell you what they're experiencing,
Yeah.
right? I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to think you're right for me to be able to join with you to get you support in your experience,
Mm,
right? I don't have
that's
to.
good.
Even for empathy, I don't have to fully agree with you. I don't have to think you're right for me to envision what it must be like for you to live the life that you do.
Yeah.
Right? That's really what it's about. Can I envision? And thereby, when I envision, can I be supportive of you or connect you to what you need? Right? You don't need my approval or permission. You don't need my okay.
Yeah.
You just need my care.
Oof.
That's all you need. Right? So if somebody seems as though they're having a hard time, ask them. Say, you know what? It's been a crazy 2 years. I know I've been struggling. I know that I've been, we going through some things. How you doing?
Yeah.
How are things been for you? I noticed some things about you. Normally you do this and now you kind of doing that. What's up with that?
Yeah.
Is it, you good?
Yeah. That's good. You're good. And it allows space for that.
Allow space. We want to create safe and brave spaces,
Mm.
right? Here's the reason why. This is what I believe. I believe that shaming someone, right? So if somebody tells you, yeah, I've been thinking about it, just stop it or get over it or it's not that bad, that's not going to help them. Shaming people does not change them in a positive way. Love, hope, and accountability is what actually transforms lives.
Love, hope, and accountability. So good.
Right? So we got to change the narrative, right? We have to, if somebody comes to us or if we go to somebody and, we have some concerns, the best thing we can do is listen, lean into what we know works.
Mm.
For many people, it's their faith, right? Faith does not have to be in opposition to mental health.
Yes.
It does not. That is not in my way, right? My view. I don't believe that's how it was designed.
Yeah.
I believe it was designed for people to be whole spiritually, emotionally, and physically,
Absolutely.
right? They work together, right? So the systems are what are in conflict,
Oof.
not the actual entities. So we reach for the entities of how they were originally designed. So we help people's emotions. We help people have space, right? And so if we need to lean into our spirituality for our folks who are prayers, yes, you can pray.
Yes.
Go ahead. I hear people say, don't just say pray. Well, okay, but I'm still gonna pray. And then I'm gonna hold your hand as I connect you to the next resource that's gonna support you, if that's what is what we share in this moment.
Yeah.
So we don't want to leave behind the spiritual and cultural practices that strengthen us.
Absolutely.
It's a part of who we are.
Absolutely. And there's
We
something
just
up
know,
in that
go ahead.
change, right? There's touch, there's hearing, and those senses, I think too, that we need those touch points to remind us of our own humanity, and again, this connection piece.
Yeah, like you said, connection is prevention.
Yeah.
Right? And on the other side of prevention, fill in the blank with whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right? But healthy connection to things that are supportive. That's what keeps people safe. That's what keeps them whole. That's what brings about healing, right? So if somebody tells you, hey, this is what's going on with me, you say okay. You say, huh. If you're scared, it's okay to say you're scared.
Yeah.
You don't have to be something that you're not. Discomfort doesn't have to keep you from supporting somebody, right? Discomfort and hope actually move you forward, right? So it's okay to be uncomfortable with it. Who really should be comfortable with suicide?
Right. Absolutely.
Really none of us, right? So if you think of it in that way, if you feel, oh, I feel anxious or I feel tight, somebody's going to say it to me, yeah, good. It'll keep you on point. I feel anxious every time.
Yeah.
I've been working with people for many years, and every time I hear, yep, no, that is what I was thinking, I go, oh! And then I gather myself and say, but I remember that this discomfort, along with the hope of the resources that I know are there, can save lives.
Yes. Yeah.
The discomfort is going to keep me humble.
Yeah.
It's going to keep me connected. It's going to keep me concerned.
Yep. That's really good. So anyone else, before we go to preventive factors?
Yeah. So just know that when we'll talk about resources, but just know if someone is actively having a hard time or actively thinking about dying, by active, I mean that they have a plan. By active, I mean they've thought about it very recently. By active, I mean they have means to do it, right? You want to make sure they get immediate help, right? That's you lean into your belief system, you lean into your prayer, you lean into connecting them to the resources, and you make sure they're connected.
Yeah.
You make sure they get to the hospital. You make sure they get to the therapist if they have one. Like we call it the warm handoff. So when we think about protective factors, we spend all this time going like, okay, we're looking at warning signs, we're looking at risk factors. We need to know that there are things that build our resilience. There are things that strengthen us. Those are the protective factors. And protective factors are how we decrease our risk.
Oh, wow. Okay. So okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So when we think about how do we build our resilience as individuals and as a people, and how do we decrease our risk? I know we've talked about connection, right? And community, the collective. There's so much healing in the collective, right?
So much healing. And just to that point, in talking about going, we recently went back to Lee's Barbershop where, we do our shape up conversations, and we end up being there for like hours after. It's just, talking. Was watching one of my friends' niece get her first little haircut hard, but we were just relaxing and chilling and I felt so much better from my time I had entered the place by the time I had exited the place, just by being in that loving, multi-support space.
Yeah, because I really believe, like I said, and I lean into my faith, right? I don't exclude anybody, but I lean into it as a measure of support. Yeah. I really believe that we were made to be communal people.
Yes.
We were built for community. We were built for connection. It's not good for a person to be alone. That's what I believe was said in the beginning, right?
Exactly.
So when we connect and we have that fellowship, that intimate connection, and I don't mean physically in that way, but I mean just building each other up and sharing ourselves with each other, we feel rejuvenated. Yes. That's why COVID has been so hard.
Yes.
Because we've had to find connection in other ways.
Yeah.
Right? And that ways that we're not like physically touching or just being in the space with each other. There's something about being in the space.
Absolutely. And to your point, another thing that I think has affected us, and especially the Black community, is that this American Western ideology around individualization, right? And hyper independence that is not the principles or theologies that we have brought with us, as an African and Black people.
Right. And so, we can spend all night here, but, let's just talk about the idea, right? So when I talk about treatment, which is another thing that is a protective factor, right? Treatment, right? It really is connecting to a therapist, and it could be to medication. It could be to peer support. But treatment doesn't have to be individual therapy in that traditional model. It can be.
Yeah.
I think it's useful. but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Right? Treatment can also be collective experiences.
Yep.
They can also be groups, right? It could also be sessions. I love you all, how you do the shape up, right? Like, and you have someone there that's able to negotiate the conversation, right? Like, you don't want to just go in and not have anybody that can address the needs of the people, right? You
Yes.
need that. But it doesn't have to be, this very, Western notion of what therapy looks like. I've always said I need to get my cosmetology license because you hear all kinds of stuff when you're washing people's hair.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many people who are doing this space, and we've been fortunate enough. There's a lady, Dr. Afia, who founded psychotherapy, and that's exactly what
Oh,
she does.
I think you told me. I have to look this
You
person
have to
up.
look it up.
I'm saying under her.
Imlashaka. I hope I'm pronouncing, not butchering her last name. It's
Okay.
MBILISHAKA. So, but amazing here in the DMV who's leading this in the Crown Act and some other things. But and really the sentiment too about, even without having a therapist there, how much time Black women spend in the beauty shop, especially back in the day, and how healing those conversations and those authentic spaces where you can really just be your full
Be yourself,
self,
right?
right?
And when we that also is a part of the church community, the
Yeah,
faith
absolutely.
community. The faith community does not have to be a stigmatizing place. It can actually be a protective factor, and it is a protective factor, right? Our faith is the thing that holds us, the thing that secures us, the thing that keeps us grounded. What gets in the way is the people.
Oof.
Right? So we have to determine as people not to be so afraid of what presents itself, right? Because we have a need to otherize. It's not us. It's not, we don't have the mental health problem. Like, it's those kinds of folks. It's the people out there. It's the person without a home. It's this, it's that. It's not me, right? We try to move it so far away from us that when things present themselves in church and faith communities, we get concerned.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, if the healing is found in the collective, the healing is found in the body, right? So, and the truth be told, if we look at it as a body, that means that person is a part of us. And so it's not a them issue. It's an us issue.
It's an us issue.
It's all of us.
Ooh.
1 in 5 means that's, count the pew.
That's real. That's
right. So we have a responsibility to create safe spaces. Safe spaces does not necessarily have to be a clinician's office.
Yeah.
Right? How many times have I said, hey, you know what? With the person I'm working with, let's go for a walk.
It takes some of the edge off.
Right. Let's go for a walk.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So treatment. Let's change the narrative about treatment. Treatment works. It's effective.
Yeah.
Now I know that there is a long history, particularly with Black folks, of a mistrust of the system of mental health care.
Absolutely.
And as somebody who's a part of the system, I got to say, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's a warranted mistrust, right? It's a system, and systems come with oppressive measures, right?
Yeah.
They come out thinking about serving Blackness and Black folk.
Yeah.
So I understand that people are very concerned.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, the system is changing because people like me are in it. Right? I'm not an anomaly.
Right.
There's other Black people. There's other people of color. There's other people of faith. Other people with differing identities that show up to this space. Right? And we also can't be so mistrustful of the system that we do damage to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed.
So we talked about faith and spirituality already. Coping skills and problem-solving skills are really important. Knowing what helps to soothe you when you're having a hard time, and it's individual. What helps calm you, what relaxes you. I don't mean like a spa day, even though that's great, but in the moment, what helps you feel better? Sometimes it's a glass of water, but making sure you're able to bring yourself back down. We already talked about access to essentials, food security, clothing, safe housing. All of those are very important. Hope for the future, right? If people need to know there's something beyond right now. And the last one, this is definitely a more technical one, limiting access to needs, right? Means are the things that people use to take their lives.
Indeed.
Here's what we know about means. The number one means in this country is firearms.
Mm.
Right? Now, where I'm at in New Jersey, that is not the number one means because we're not gun country here. The number one means in New Jersey is actually strangulation.
Wow.
Right? So when I think about working with somebody who is vulnerable or who might be going through a hard time, I don't want to have the means easily accessible for them.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm not here to advocate about people's firearms, but I am here to say if somebody's struggling, then we need to have responsible laws.
Absolutely.
We need to be, as people who love them, we need to be responsible to make sure the firearms are not accessible to them. Places like, I know in New Jersey, there have been some areas that have become known for people dying by suicide. Certain bridges, certain train stations, certain parking decks.
Wow.
In those places, you want to put up safety nets. In those places, you want to put up placards with the resource center hotline, right?
Yeah.
Those are all things that help people when they're having that moment of ambivalence to think a little bit differently, right?
Yeah.
So I tell parents, you know, if you have a youth that's struggling, put the knives away.
Yeah.
Put the sharps away.
Yeah.
Here's what we know. We know that once somebody picks a means, they are more than likely staying with that means. It's something about our brains.
Wow.
So they look for anything to take their life. Once they decide this is what it is,
Yeah.
most people stay with that. So if we remove it or decrease the access to it,
Yeah.
then it's almost like taking the option away.
Yeah.
Right? So put the sharps away. Put, baby proof. Put the cords away. Put the belts away.
Yeah.
And then also buy a lockbox for your medicine.
Wow. Okay.
Right? Buy a lockbox for your medicine if somebody's struggling. Don't go to Costco and buy the 800 finger Tylenol. Right?
Yeah.
That is the way that we protect. So when we think about parents, how they can, because I hear, I'm thinking about caregivers, teachers, counselors, mentors, how can, community members, how can we help take care of our young people, right? Like, how can we mitigate risk with them? How do we build their resilience? Well, there's something called positive childhood experiences. And these are the things that help build young people up. This is what research shows us. When a youth is able to talk with their family about their feelings, when they felt that their family stood by them in hard times, when they enjoyed participating in a community tradition, when they have a sense of belonging, when they feel supported by friends, when they had a non-parent adult who took genuine interest in them, and when they felt safe and protected. All of us can be involved in doing that.
Absolutely. And I feel like, that's great for children. It's also great for us as adults to make sure that we are continuing to take, care of ourselves and take care of each other and be intentional about that space and about those touch points and about creating positive interactions. I think sometimes we're so hard and rushed with each other, and for all the reasons, but just to be a little bit more intentional about being kinder and gentler, and looking for compassion, and looking for like, okay, maybe this person is experiencing something beyond what not just being angry at me. Then I think that allows room to say, okay, how can I show up, at least as an opportunity to show up for this person in a loving and supporting way.
Right. A little grace for others and a little grace for ourselves.
Yes.
Right. It goes a long way. Right. And I say, all of us have hard days. All of us have days when things aren't working right. And, we know that empathy matters. And sometimes I joke, sometimes you got to pull the empathy up from your toes. Sometimes, some days you feel like it's right here. You can just grab it. And some days you're like, I barely have it. But go ahead and reach down, grab it from your toes and pull it all the way up, because you never know what that person is carrying. You cannot see the invisible load that they're walking with, right? And what it's taking for them to just show up.
That's a word. That's a word. That's a word. This has been so powerful. I know we have a hotline. There's a national hotline.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about resources.
Yes.
So the national hotline is called the Lifeline. You can Google it. You can say it into your, I don't have an iPhone, I know, but you can say it into Siri. You can say it into your Android. The Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. That's 273-8255. You can also go online. You can chat with them. You can text with them. Here's the other great thing. Next month, meaning July, I want to say it's either the 16th or the 18th. I believe it's the 16th. The national number will exist as the one I just gave, but it will also have 988.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Which is awesome. Now, it'll just be in its beginning stages. So we want to give it a chance, right? But the idea that we don't have to call 911 and we don't necessarily have to involve police authorities and mental health concerns, that is meaningful for communities of color.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Where we can connect directly with a mental health and wellness professional.
Incredible. A huge step in the right direction.
Yes, I agree. We got to give it a chance. We got to see how it goes. But definitely my hope, and I also believe that it'll be easier to remember.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not, if you're having a moment and somebody just says something to you, your insides are like, oh my gosh, they just said they're thinking about dying. What do I do? A 988, right? We want to rehearse it so that it becomes, second nature to us. There's a couple of other hotlines that I think are pretty important. Along with the national hotline. There's also the Trevor Project, and we did spend a little time talking about our LGBTQ folks. And so the Trevor Project is specifically for folks that identify as LGBTQ. And their hotline is, you can text them, you can go on, you can also go on their website, the Trevor Project, or you can call them at 866-488-7386. That's 866-488-7386. That's the Trevor Project. You can text hello to 741-741. That's just a crisis hotline, a crisis text line. And then the last one I'll leave us with is the trans hotline. And that's specifically for folks that identify as trans. And their number is 877-565-8860. So there's a national hotline, and there's so many more hotlines. If you're interested, please reach out to Wise Counsel. We can always send you a list of hotlines specific to maybe what you're dealing with or concerned about. But those are some national ones that I think are really important. And, another hotline that never closes down is prayer.
Indeed. This has been so informative. I'm so glad we have this for replay, because it's like so many notes I would have loved to take, and so much language that I think that you have brought to this space that will hopefully empower people and extend beyond this space. So thank you. Deeply.
Thank you for having me. I'm just so happy that we are opening up spaces to have conversations so people can feel healthy and whole, right? Like, that's the goal, to feel healthy, whole, connected, so that you can live the life you've been called to live, so that you can fulfill your mission and purpose, right? And so in order to do that, you need to be empowered. And so this is a part of the empowering process. So I'm super excited that you hold space for that.
Indeed. Thank you so much. And thank you. I see Reverend Jay is on the line as well. Go back 20 years or so. So,
yes.
To think about when you talk about life journeys, like, I had a friend who's like, yeah, it's crazy, like, to see how far you came. I was like, but yeah, is it? Like, I'm probably pretty much, doing what I was called to do. Like, it was always in me, and so we are grateful for our community. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being willing to engage with us on a heavy topic. And kudos to everybody that made space and time here. Again, if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to either me or Wise Counsel. Kalisha can point you in the right direction. We love you. We are here as a support. We are committed to standing in the gap in the spaces, and I think one of the things about the Starting With Today community, they have stood in the gap for me as well in ways
Mm-hmm.
that have supported me beyond. So
Mm-hmm.
as we talk about community and love and my
Beautiful.
parents also, thank you. They are godsend. My parents are my lifeline, like my
Yeah, yeah.
designated divine hotline. So thank God for them as well. So all
I
right,
love
we
it.
want y'all to be blessed and healthy and happy and well loved and supported, and also provide that to others in our spaces that we're looking out and we're being intentional, and taking care of each other.
Absolutely.
So that's it. Tell us where they can find you real quick.
Yes, I was just thinking, like, hey, I don't think I told them.
Yeah.
I get so excited about talking about prevention. My private practice is Wise Counsel Services. I'm licensed in the state of New Jersey to provide individual, group, and family therapy. I do so in a virtual manner. But I also, a large part of the practice is spending time doing these kinds of things, educating the community, be it in institutions of higher learning, be it like community spaces online, or organizations. So if you are interested in therapy and you're a New Jersey resident, hit up Wise Counsel Services, and you can find us at www.wisecounselservicesllc.com. Or if you're anywhere in the U.S. and you're interested in having some type of training, either in person or virtually, you can also connect with me at Wise at the same address. Okay.
And you're on Instagram as Wise.
So we're on Instagram as Wise Counsel Services, and we're on Facebook as Wise Counsel Services. And I think, and also if you have an inquiry, you can also email me at Wise Counsel. Let me see, what is that? wisecounselservices@gmail.com.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Of course, you can find Starting With Today at Starting With Today across all social media platforms, except for Twitter. We're Starting W Today. You can find us at startingwithtoday.com as well on the internet, as we call it. You can find me, Charlene Anderson, across all social media as true_Charlene, as I try to stay true to my mission to be here.
I love it. I love it. Stay true.
Stay true.
We need you. We need you.
Thank you.
And so everybody listening, thanks for joining us. And remember, you're not alone. So no matter whether you felt something in this conversation, reach out for help and support, okay?
All right.
Blessings to all of you.
Indeed. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye, friends.
Bye.